What is going on, everybody in Wrestling Review Society, twitch.tv/HeelKevin, and Real Pro Wrestling's YouTube page. Guys, this is your episode of The War Room this week, and I have a very fantastic guest joining me this week. But before I bring him on, I just want to take a chance to thank our amazing sponsors who make this show happen each and every time I turn this camera on. First of which, the one scrolling at the bottom of your screen is Raise Energy. Guys, all you have to do is go to repsports.com, search Raise Energy, and place your orders. Use promo code HeelKevin to save 15% at checkout. It is a zero sugar, zero calorie energy drink. And with zero sugar, zero calorie, there's no better way to start your day than with a can of Raise Energy. I got mine right here. It's going to keep me hydrated throughout the show. I absolutely love them. Also, guys, arockdesigns.com or Arock Designs on Facebook. This is my wife's custom business. She makes all those cool wrestling cups you see floating around the hobby. If you want to get your hands on any of her merchandise, go to Arock Designs on Facebook or arockdesigns.com. That's right. We have our own website now. You can place your orders there and get anything you guys want, whether it be wrestling related or non-wrestling related. With that being said, guys, you're going to recognize my guest tonight from his time with Impact, American Top Team, and most recently on WWE's Most Wanted Treasures episode. He was joined by Booker T in search for the WCW television title. He is the owner of one of, if not the greatest ring-used wrestling collection I have ever seen in my life. Ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming Dan Lambert. Dan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great. Once again, I cannot thank you enough for being here.
No, it's my pleasure.
So I'm just going to go and just jump right into this. You have an amazing collection behind you. How long have you been collecting memorabilia and more specifically wrestling titles?
Probably around 25 years.
Do you remember what your first title was that you
I actually bought them in a lot. I think I got like 20 belts at the same time. The first lot of belts that I got it from an old referee from Florida Championship Wrestling who had been accumulating them for years. And he worked with one of the belt makers, a guy who was partners with Ed Schumann and Reggie Parks belts. And they had a lot of belts and I went up to a TNA show. I think that was the first group of them that I bought.
Very nice. So I remember your time in Impact when you were standing in the middle of the ring and you were emptying that book bag. You had the first title that the Road Warriors ever won. You had the first title that Bruno Sammartino ever won. Recently on the WWE Most Wanted Treasures episode, you had the first title Hogan ever won. Why is it so important that you have the first ever title that they've held, and how hard is it to find those championships?
You know, it's weird. Over time, belts just pop up every now and then. I found some of my own. There's these guys out there that are just enthusiasts for belts, and you know, they may not have the wherewithal to buy and keep the belts themselves, but they really get off on the hunt for them. They actually call themselves belt hunters, and they go in. They want to track down these belts. They find the belts that either they grew up liking or watching. They try to get leads through social media or whatnot on where these belts exist, and they hunt them down. They go knock on doors. They go reach out to people, and they find them and they buy them, and they end up coming my way at some time or another through some of the guys. It's just catch can. I'll go years without hearing a belt that's available, and then a week will pop up and, you know, 3 belts pop up. So, you know, I've just gotten them over the years, and I guess I've been fortunate where some of the belts that are at least pretty cool or special to me became available, like some of the ones you mentioned. And when they did, I grabbed them when I had the opportunity.
Yeah, you know, I was always a Road Warriors fan. You know, you hear it in wrestling all the time, the Road Warrior pop. And they were just captivating wrestlers. And I know you have or at least at one point had Hawk's first ever tag team title. So it was great to see that belt.
Funny you mention it. It happens to be the shelf. It's looking at me right in the face.
The one with the cracked side plate?
Oops. There you go.
Look at those. Jeez.
The old National Tag Team Championship belts. It's the first belt those guys held.
That is fantastic. So if I were to ask you, both in your collection and yet to have obtained, what is your holy grail belt? Like, which one is most important to you in your collection, and which one do you have that you just have that urge that you have to have if you don't already have it?
I'll get to that in a second. I will, before I forget, those national tag team belts sat in the trunk of a car in a barn for like 20 years. And the guy did not know they were in the trunk of his car. His father was involved in the promotion, and it was his dad's car. And one day he finally got around and was cleaning out the old barn and opened up the trunk, and there they were.
That has got
with an old Georgia tag team title, which happens to be right there.
Jesus.
It was used in the 70s in Georgia.
Just sitting in the trunk of a car.
Yeah. In a barn.
It makes me think of those shows like Storage Wars and stuff like that. Like, you never know what you're going to come across.
Yeah, the stories that come with how these belts were obtained or how they got away from the promotion. So, some of the stories are as good as the belts themselves. I mean, there's stories of ex-wives getting pissed off, guys not getting paid and leaving the promotion and, walking into the locker room while the champion's taking a shower and grabbing his belt on the way out because he's pissed off. He thinks he got shortchanged by the promoter. There's some really good stories that go with the belts. I try to get as many of them as I can when I get the belts, get the stories that go along with them as to how they were found too.
They kind of add to the mystique of the title.
They really do. They really do. So getting the question about the belts that I have or that I would like to have, I think, my favorite belt that I have is the old Georgia Heavyweight Championship belt. It's a really simple belt. Actually, it's right here.
It's hard to keep up with them all.
It's funny. I just happened to have grabbed a spot in this room in the center, and some of these belts happening right here.
I'm going to put you on full screen for a second. Let's take a look at that.
All right. So I just love the belt because it's just so simple and plain, and it was on WTBS Superstation from 6:05 to 8:05 p.m. for so many years every Saturday night. And unlike a lot of the belts, the promotion kept this belt for like 20-something years. It never, they never updated it. They never renovated. They never changed the color. They never changed the plates. So a lot of the belts, like I'm looking to my left and I see a Florida Heavyweight Championship belt, and I see the next version of the Florida Heavyweight Championship belt 10 years later. I see the next version of that like 10, 15 years after that. But this Georgia belt was just in the same promotion, the exact same belt for all those years, held by a literal who's who of pro wrestling. And that's probably my favorite. From a historical standpoint, probably the coolest belt I ever came across was the original title when Vince Sr. started the WWF, broke away from the NWA, reached out to Buddy Rogers, who still had a small promotion in Ohio, and said, "Hey, come on down. I'm gonna set up a new company. I want to put the belt on this new young buck that's going to be my star named Bruno Sammartino. Bring your belt from your Ohio promotion. You'll drop it to Bruno. We'll then come up with a new belt for Bruno eventually, and we'll give you your belt back." So that belt went down that way. Bruno won the belt. Shortly thereafter, he got the new belt. Buddy Rogers ended up back with the old belt. When he passed away, gave it to his buddy, who was also his tag team partner, a guy named Johnny Barron, one of the original WWF tag team champions. He ended up with the belt. And then when he passed away, the wife happened to find the tag team belt and the original WWF championship belt in her attic. And I was able to get those from her through a third party. I don't have the heavyweight title anymore. It's one of the few belts I've ever parted ways with. The WWE saw the guy that got him for me with a picture of it, and they wanted it, and they reached out to him, and he does a lot of work for him. He makes a lot of the belts and found a lot of my belts, and they put a little pressure on him. They really wanted the belt. They really wanted to buy it, and I ended up just giving it to them, and they gave me some other belts that they had, and I think they let me backstage for a Raw or something like that.
I could imagine that'd be one that they would be after. And we have a lot of people watching this show, and everybody's really loving the collection. I just want to acknowledge some of the comments really quick. One of our users on Twitch, Ashlock209, says, "Your belt collection is amazing." One of my good friends, Willie Finesse, he's an independent wrestler, says, "Dan, can I move in? Let's be family."
You can go check it out if you want. I don't know about moving in.
But I hear you tell these stories about the how you acquired the belts and the stories behind them. What's one of the crazier stories that you have behind one of the belts and how it made its way to you.
All right, I referenced it actually a minute ago, but I'm going to grab it. I think it's.
Dan's going to get his cardio in going after all these belts.
Cardio in here. World class championship wrestling. Obviously, everybody remembers how hot world class was with the Von Erichs back in Texas when they were on absolute fire. And
oh yes,
Bobby Fulton was there with the Fantastics, and he got pissed off at Fritz, thinking that Fritz stiffed him on a big payout, and was so mad he left. And as he's leaving the building, says, "You know what? I think I walked by that belt in somebody's duffel bag on my way out," and went back into the locker room. Whoever was the champion was in the shower, reached down into the bag, grabbed the belt, took it with him, and said, "I'm out of here." That's a pretty good story, I think.
Oh no, absolutely. I can just imagine, stepping into the shower, you got your bag all packed up, ready to hit the road, and you come back and your belt's gone, much like a Chris Jericho at a Chili's.
Yeah, right. There's actually a story that mirrors that, and I'm in the MMA business. We train fighters, and I've been doing that since the mid 1990s, and it's funny because as that sport has grown, it's interesting to see how closely it resembles professional wrestling with the promotional wars and, the battles with the talent and people trying to get over and, cliques forming amongst fighters and managers and wars going on between the guys. And it's just funny because you've been a wrestling fan long enough, and I've been a pro wrestling fan since I was like 6 or 7 years old. I think I got my first Wrestling Observer from Dave Meltzer when I was like in 7th grade. I'm 52, so that'll date that. But it's interesting if you follow the stories in professional wrestling, just how closely they mirror storylines and what really happens in reality in MMA. And that belt story is kind of close to a story in MMA where GSP claimed that he was in the shower after the fight with Johnny Hendricks when he won a split decision that was hotly contested. And then he told Dana he's retiring. And apparently the promotion wasn't really happy about it. GSP said he got in the shower, and when he got out of the shower, his belt was gone. The promotion came in and stole his belt. They didn't want to let him keep the belt because they were going to give it to somebody else. And when I heard that, I was just thinking, oh, man, that kind of reminds me of the Bobby Fulton story. But I've just had a million instances where I've said, my gosh, that is so close to what's actually happened. It's happened a million times in pro wrestling.
I not so much anymore. But I used to be I used to follow the UFC as hard as I possibly could. I'm more a wrestling fan than I am a fighting fan. No disrespect.
I like too.
But I remember that fight, and I was the biggest GSP fan. I thought he was the GOAT. I thought he was the best pound for pound. I loved the way he would just go in and dissect his opponents. But that match you talk about, I remember watching it, and when they announced him as the winner, the air was just sucked out of the building that night. Like nobody could believe it.
Yeah, it was a tight one. I know a lot of promotions and guys like say, don't leave it in the hands of the judges if you're going to bitch about the decision. But you're fighting the best of the best. It's not like you just go in there and finish everybody every fight. They're training hard too. So if you go and you put in the camp, you put in all the time, you go through the years it takes to get in that position to fight for a title, and then if you get the short end of a decision that most people disagree with, it's kind of a tough pill to swallow.
Oh, I would imagine. You dedicate your life and you train and you get to the highest level. So I can definitely understand that. But I heard you say in an interview you did a while ago that it was actually pro wrestling that got you into the fight game. If you don't mind me asking, what got you into pro wrestling, and what was the transition into the mixed martial arts world?
Pro wrestling, I don't know exactly when it was. I was probably 6 or 7 years old and flipping through channels Saturday at noon on Channel 6 down here in South Florida, and Championship Wrestling from Florida happened to be on. And Ox Baker was tied up in the ropes, and the assassin number 1, Joey Hamilton, was stuffing like the styrofoam head that you would put a mask on, or a mannequin face on or something. and I guess they were having a fight over a mask or whatnot, and the assassin was stuffing the styrofoam head inside Ox Baker's mouth. I think Sir Oliver Humperdinck was going crazy because he obviously managed one of them at the time. And I remember seeing it and saying, I don't know what the hell this is, but I like it. And I became a fan. I got my grandfather to start taking me every Wednesday night. As I got older, then when I could drive myself, it was Wednesday night in Miami Beach Convention Center. It was Monday at the West Palm Beach Auditorium. I met some guys backstage. Gordon Nelson ran the ring crew. If I agreed to stay late and help him break down the ring and load it up, I could get in for free, and more importantly, get in the back and get autographs. So I was all in. I was a wrestling nerd from a young age and still am.
Absolutely. And I just, much like a lot of people, my first real introduction to Dan Lambert, the man, and obviously the character, was when you had that run with Impact, and you would stand in the middle of the ring and you would say how you were the biggest wrestling fan in the arena. And I was like, this guy's full of shit. And then I heard you talk, and, a lot of people use this phrase, but I think it's true with you. You have forgot more about professional wrestling than I'm ever going to know. And it's just, I love hearing you talk about it and the lineage of these belts and stuff like that. We do have a question coming in from not so much a question, but a comment coming in from my good buddy Stephen Hammer, who is also a belt collector. Says, just turning this on now, I'm excited to see real belts, especially at J-Mar IC. Do you have an Intercontinental title by J-Mar?
I've got quite a few Intercontinentals here. I'm not sure which ones J-Mar make. I had a couple run-ins with that dude, and he kind of pissed me off. So I'm not his biggest follower, but I'll grab a few Intercontinentals if you give me a minute.
Oh, take your time. Take your time. Guys, this is our sit down with the man himself, Dan Lambert, with one of the largest, if not the largest collection of ring used belts. Absolute amazing knowledge of wrestling. Stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button. And here's Dan with the Intercontinentals.
Here's one Intercontinental. Here's another Intercontinental. Hold on a second. I think I have one other Intercontinental, and it's all the way up top there. And I don't have my ladder, so I'm not going to be able to.
No, that's fine. We appreciate you showing off any belts, let alone the number of belts you showed off already.
I'm not sure if those are J-Mar belts or not, though. I could not tell you.
And my buddy Steven says belt porn at its finest. I've been marking out ever since he popped up on the screen like this. So me being the fan that I am, you guys can obviously I'm sitting here stuttering trying to get the introductions out of the way.
You asked me the what belt I wish I had, and it's an easy answer. My favorite belt of all time is the old North American title from Mid-South, that gigantic
Magnum TA.
Yeah, Magnum TA feud with Mr. Wrestling 2, which is one of my favorite feuds ever. But Hacksaw Butch Reed, Dick Slater, all those guys, Ted DiBiase, they all had that belt. It was an amazing belt. I actually had a chance to buy it probably like in the early 2000s, and the guy that had it just totally tried to screw me on it because he knew how much of a mark I was for that particular belt. And the price he threw me at that time was just so far and away higher than what he paid for it. I ended up finding out what he paid for it, and I was just so pissed off by him trying to bleed me dry for that particular belt that I told him to piss off and never bought another belt from him. And I've probably regretted it every day since. I can't believe I didn't buy that belt. I'm such a douche. But that's probably my favorite belt of all time. But there's some really cool belts. I mean, like the old school belts are just so simple in their designs, and I just love them. I mean, I'll grab one here. This is an old Florida tag team title from like the early 70s. And I just look how simple this thing is, but it is so cool. I love the old simple designs. There's if you remember Joe Blanchard, Tully Blanchard's father had Southwest Championship Wrestling, which was and Bobby Jaggers and the Sheep Herders and, Cowboy Scott Casey and those guys over there. They used to have bloodbaths like every other match. Their title belt, hold on a second.
Absolutely. Guys, I can see all of your questions in the comment. We're going to continue to address the viewer comments, but we're just having a great time getting the story behind these belts. So don't be discouraged if we haven't hit your comment yet. We're definitely going to get to them, but let's sit back and listen to some belt stories from the man himself.
They called this the cowhide belt.
Yes.
And it literally has cowhide along the instead of like a leather strap, it's covered in actual cowhide. Terry Funk, I bring old wrestlers down. Pre-pandemic, I've got a group of like 4 or 5 buddies of mine that I used to go to the matches with as a kid that I've remained friends with, and they're total wrestling nerds like I am. And we got into a routine of once a month, we'd bring an old wrestler from the territory days down to Florida, put them up in a hotel, go to a Brazilian steakhouse, and have a couple-hour dinner, and they'd tell us stories, which is great. We've probably done it maybe 60 times or so. So a lot of names that you'd recognize. And Terry Funk came down one time, and he told us that this belt was actually made by a jeweler who was just friends with Joel Blanchard. He was like, I needed a belt. And the jeweler's like, I can make a belt. And I work with materials like that all the time. And he actually made the belt. And he's thinking, we're in, Southwest Championship Wrestling. Let's make it a cowboy theme. Put cowhide on it. I mean, how cool is that?
That is... I would have never guessed that a jeweler made it, and I'm having an amazing time sitting here listening to the stories behind these belts. And once again, I know I've said this before, but I cannot thank you enough for doing this. I know you don't do a lot of media, but Stephen Hammer's having the time of his life in these comment sections. Like I said, he's a huge belt guy. He says that I saw a video from a few years ago. You had a white J-Mar Cody IC. Is that belt still in your collection?
Yeah, that's actually when I agreed reluctantly to give the WWE that original title back. I said, get me backstage on a Raw, give me some current belts, throw a few belts in there for me. And the only belt I asked for by name was at the time they were using the white strapped Intercontinental belt. And I said, give me that white strapped Intercontinental belt. I just love it. I just think it's so cool looking. And I remember, I think Shawn Michaels was the first guy to ever have the white strap Intercontinental belt back then. I think they actually had a run where he had one. And I just thought it was such a cool belt. I won't say the Big Show may have had it at this particular time. So that was one of the belts they gave me. Let's see. I definitely have it. Hold on one second here.
Stephen Hammer, your dream's about to come true, my friend.
Shit, where is that? Lighting in this room sucks, but I should be able to see white.
I mean, the room looks beautiful from here, Dan.
Oh, thank you. God damn, what the hell is that belt? All right, now you got me scratching my head.
Well, while Dan looks, guys, I want to remind you that this show is sponsored by Raise Energy. Go to repsports.com, search Raise Energy. It is a 0-calorie, 0-sugar energy drink. And with 0 calories, 0 sugar, there's no better way to start your day than with a can of Raise Energy. And if you use promo code HEALKEVIN, you'll save 15% at checkout. We've tried a new flavor each and every stream. To this day, my favorite is either the Voodoo flavor or the Baja Lime. They are limited edition flavors, so if you want to try those, you are going to have to act fast. But other than that, their strawberry and their other flavors are very, very good flavors as well.
Oh, shit, it's right in front of my face. It was somebody moved it from my WWE side. Filming that show, I think they played with a couple of the belts.
Let's take a look at that. There you go, Stephen Hammer.
There you go, Hammer. And
I know he loves that belt.
When I was up there reaching, I mentioned some of the old belts and just how simple they were. This was actually the predecessor belt for the WWF Tag Team title. It was also one of the belts used in Buddy Rogers' promotion that they brought over, and it was his United States Tag Team Championships. It got 1962 right there. and they just threw this little plate on there because if you remember, they called it Capital Sports when
Yes, sir.
Senior started it, so they just put the little Capitol building right there. But just it's so simple and so basic and so plain and so nothing. But man, when you think of like the fabulous Kangaroos and the Valiant Brothers and guys that held a belt like this, it's pretty damn cool to me.
So, I heard you say earlier that you sit in there and you see, belt A that was used from this time to this time, then the belt that replaced it, then the belt that replaced that one. How often do you just walk into that room and just get lost down memory lane just looking at the collection that you've acquired over the years?
It happens a lot, and that's what makes it so cool to me. I mean, I grew up idolizing these guys, and all these guys were fighting for the belt. The belt was everything in the territories, and it's kind of lost some of its meaning in today because they just turn around so often.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's so many.
There's so many, and I mean, I'm looking at Bruno, the belt that they replaced, that Buddy Rogers belt with Bruno. I'm looking at that right now, which that's actually a really good story too behind that one. But I mean, Bruno held that for like 9 years. And it's a fucking title. 9 years was his range. Now you got guys that don't hold the belt for 9 days.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, I don't think it has the same meaning, but then again, then I'll sit there and, a friend of mine, Bobby Lashley, who used to train MMA and fought and trained with our team. And he's a good buddy of mine and the greatest guy in the world, man. When he finally got his run, it meant so much to him. So, it's easy for me to say it doesn't mean as much these days. But then when I saw what it actually meant for him to actually get the belt, as much time and effort as he's put into it, I see how much it meant to him. So maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think that you are. And we have a question coming in, and this kind of goes along with what I was wondering, and I'm going to elaborate on it a little bit later. But completely at your disclosure, if you don't mind, what is the most expensive belt you've ever gone after? Or even a little more personal, if you don't mind, what's the most you've ever spent on one belt?
The guy wanted 40 grand for that North American belt back in like 2000 and maybe 2. And back then that was enough that it really pissed me off. I would say I've got 100 belts here. I would say on average, I probably spent over the last 25 years, maybe 6 grand is my average purchase for a belt, 7 grand. I've spent upwards of 30 grand. For a title belt. That's the most I've actually spent. I wish I could tell you 40. I wish I bought that North American title when I did, but that's the most I've spent for a particular belt. I'm probably between 5, 6, 7, 8 grand on average. Sometimes I've gotten belts for a song. Sometimes I've overpaid for a belt. But again, a lot of it comes down to what the belt meant to me. Seeing it growing up. I remember getting a block of belts at one point, and the old Polynesian heavyweight title belt was in it, or it may have been the tag team belt. I'm not exactly sure which one it was, but that was Peter Maiavia's promotion over in Hawaii back in like the 70s. And I didn't grow up watching that. I had no access to Polynesian Championship wrestling, and I remember the picture of King Curtis all bloodied up and stuff, in the wrestling magazines. But I didn't follow that. So, I mean, it was a really cool belt. It had these lions on the side of it. It was heavy as hell. And I thought it was really cool, but it really didn't mean anything to me because I never saw it. I never watched it. I just never saw clips of it and followed that closely. And eventually when I ended up meeting The Rock he ended up filming his show at our gym, one of his reality shows. It was MMA based, this particular episode. And, I knew it would mean more to him than me. I gave it to him. Because I mean, it was his grandfather's promotion, so it probably meant a lot to him. That belt,
I would imagine,
but it really didn't mean anything to me. I had no ties to it whatsoever. But I sit here and I look at the Florida Championship belt. I mean, shit, every Wednesday night, every Monday night, I'm there. I can't tell you how many of those shows I went to and how much of my childhood I spent watching that change hands from guy to guy to guy to guy. That belt means a ton to me. I love it. So, it's really just the ones that I grew up watching and the ones that I grew up seeing. There's a couple cool historical belts here that I didn't grow up watching. I'll grab this one. This was this is a very cool belt. This is the old WWA heavyweight title belt. It's got like this velvet background instead of a leather strap. But this dates back in the 50s and the 60s. This was Dick the Bruiser's promotion in Indianapolis. And I mean, you look at the list of guys that held this title. It's the old school guys. And that belt, I didn't really grow up watching it, but I look at the names of the guys that held it. I'm like, oh my God, it's so cool. I got to show you this too. I get a little roll.
I want to see everything you're willing to show, Dan. And I'm sure everyone else watching does as well.
But like the belts today, if you go backstage at a WWE show, there's like this big rolling toolbox.
Yeah.
Drawers in it where the belts go. And a guy goes there, they hand him his belt, he goes to the ring, and when the match is over, he goes back and he puts the belt back in its drawer, Back then, this is the case that the WWA heavyweight champion, and if you can read it right there, it even says world's heavyweight champion on there. I know my lighting's not the greatest.
Oh, no, we can see it.
This is an old leather case that this guy would take his belt after the match, go backstage, put it in his little suitcase, so to speak, throw it in the back of his car, hop in his car and drive 400 miles to the next town, or 300 miles or 200 miles, depending on where, if he was in the Texas promotion or if he's down in Florida and they were a little closer. But I mean, this thing just traveled with this guy everywhere. And I just think that history of these belts just, I just think it's cool as hell. I think it's really, really cool.
I think it's very cool that you have that because, we see the belts and stuff, but how many of those cases still exist? Everybody goes after the belts, but I'd be really curious to see how many of those original cases are still in existence. And the fact that you have one, I mean, it just adds to the story of the belt, the presentation of the belt. I'm blown away that you actually have one.
Yeah, that's the only one I've ever seen. And I used to get to the matches early and park my car and go run up backstage where the wrestlers would show up to try to get autographs. And when the matches were over, I'd be taking down the ring, but I would try to time it sometimes where I could run in the back and certain autographs I didn't. Actually, this is before I started taking down the ring. I would park in the back and get the autographs when the guys were leaving. Once I got access by taking down the ring, I used to get them in the locker room. But I would stay outside and I'd watch the guys leave and I'd watch them come. And they would just throw the belt in the trunk. They'd walk out, pop open the trunk, throw their duffel bag or their suitcase in there, throw the championship belt right back. They're like, oh my God, that's the title belt. I got great stories of these guys coming and going from the matches that were just that was almost as fun as some of the matches sometimes, just seeing them come, seeing the interactions with the fans backstage. Not that there were a ton that would show up in the back, but I mean, I remember being like 9 years old. And the Assassins pulled up at the Sunrise Musical Theater. They did the show in Fort Lauderdale instead of Miami that Wednesday. And I see them pull up in this Cadillac. And I'm like, oh, my God, they got their masks on, and they get out of the car. And I'm all nervous. And I got my little autograph book. And I go to the Assassin. I'm like, excuse me, sir, Mr. Assassin, can I have your autograph, please? And he just looks at me, doesn't miss a beat, and says, fuck off, kid. Just keeps walking. Oh, my friend, oh my God, he said, I'm going to key his car. I'm like, no, I'm not. Don't kill me, So it's just, great stories backstage. Abdullah the Butcher got out of his car and he would wear a short sleeve button down dress shirt. And you know how guys have their initials stenciled on the pocket?
Yeah.
He would have 2 cigars in his shirt pocket and the initials were ATB, Abdullah the Butcher. How great is that? That's what the guy's initials are on his dress shirt.
I mean, that's just living the gimmick.
Yes, absolutely living the gimmick.
It was very prominent back then. I hear you tell the Assassin story and Abdullah the Butcher story. I have a friend of mine. He's an NWA Hall of Famer. Went by the name Iceberg. He lives very close to me, and he used to tell me stories, or still tells me stories about Abdullah all the time. And Abdullah is one of those guys who just lived the gimmick like that. It wasn't the gimmick. That was who he was. And he made you believe that's who he was.
Judging by him coming down for dinner a few years ago and I had him, I think he still is that guy. But speaking of living the gimmick, I brought Nikita Koloff down for dinner. And a buddy of mine is the one who goes and tracks these guys down and negotiates a price and gets everything set up. Then he calls me and I book the airfare and take care of them when they come down. And he sends me a text and he's like, okay, here's the info for Nikita's plane ticket. And he's like, name, date of birth, frequent flyer, if they have a frequent flyer number, what airport he wants to come out of, the date he wants to go back and whatnot. And I'm reading it. It says Nikita Koloff. And I text him back and I'm like, hey, dipshit, I know his stage name, but I really doubt the American Airlines flight attendant gives a shit what he wrestled. Probably want his real name. He texts me back, that is his real name. He had it changed. I'm like, no, his name was like Steve Simpson or Scott Simpson or something like that. I remember reading in the Observer. Nope, had it changed. He comes down. He says he did not speak English for years. He said back then, he said, you lived your gimmick. He went in there. He got a speeding ticket in North Carolina and went to the hearing and spoke with the Russian accent to the judge. How you say? It's just, and he's telling the story now and he's just laughing about it. He's like, I went years. I worked out in this one gym and I never spoke a word to him. And I went in the first time with Uncle Ivan. He still calls him Uncle Ivan. And he's like after like a year and a half, they come up and they say, sir, we know you're a star, but you're going to have to pay. You haven't paid since you've been here. And he's like, he just starts throwing out a couple of words in Russian to him and saying, Uncle Ivan, and he walks out. He's like, man, I just live the gimmick.
I love hearing that stuff. I was a fan of the fourth wall. I love the mystique behind the characters. Kodai Radio Network, I see your comment. We're going to get to that in just a second. But now that we're talking about living the gimmick, I really want to get your opinion on this because not too long ago, we talk about living the gimmick and how important it was, but not too long ago, fans and just wrestling viewers all the way around were up in arms because Sergeant Slaughter wasn't a real sergeant. What's your take on that? Like, everybody needs to calm the hell down. These guys live the character.
It's just, I'd like to say I'm surprised by something like that, but I see shit in the news these days and what triggers people and what pisses people off. And it's just mind-boggling. It's like people just need an excuse to be pissed off about something or be triggered by something or be upset by something. That's why when you reached out to me, I'm like, I don't talk to the media anymore, but I don't really like them, but I like cops and you're a cop. So count me in. I like talking wrestling. I refuse to talk to MMA media anymore. People are just so full of shit in that line of business. And they're just looking for things to make stories or make clickbait or whatever you want to call it. It's just like, who gives a shit? From this hour to this hour when I'm watching on television, or from this time to this time when I'm at the arena, that shit's real to me. That meme, it's real to me, damn it. It was real to me, damn it. It just was. You go and you watch a movie, is it real? Is that guy really a trained robber, or was he a murderer, or is Anthony Hopkins a psychopath, and a mass murderer? No, what the fuck difference does it make? You're at the movies, enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that that's always my go-to argument when people say, it's first off, I love Ken Anderson's tagline, wrestling's real, people are fake. I've always loved that tagline. But my argument is very much the same. Like, you want to sit here and nitpick that wrestling is fake. Okay, but you'll go and watch Transformers because it's so easy to believe that an alien life form from another planet came to Earth in search of a life force, and now they're transforming cars. But you won't say anything about that. It's mind-boggling. And it's funny because, at our gym, we bust balls about everything at our gym. And a lot of the fighters bust balls, and a lot of them are wrestling fans. And it's kind of like, bro, the MMA world is kind of split. Some people in the MMA world are huge wrestling fans and love it, and the ones that aren't hate it. And the ones that hate it, no gray area. There's no gray area. But the ones that have hated it, they've never watched it. They don't know shit about it. They just think, oh, that's fake. I hate it. So we're always busting balls. And I've got our wrestling coach on our team who's also fought before. Greatest guy in the world. He was a 2-time NCAA heavyweight champion, 4-time finals in the NCAAs, went to the Olympics in whatever year it was in China, in Beijing. I think it was 2008. Great dude. He actually did some of the Impact stuff with us. He got in the ring and actually got to suplex someone, and he likes it. But he tells a story which is just so funny because there's a lot of college wrestling influence in MMA. A lot of the college wrestlers, end up fighting. And he tells a story that there was some type of event down in the Keys, and a bunch of the
the head coaches from various schools across the country came down to the Keys for it, including the two brothers that run the Iowa program, the Brand brothers, are NCAA champions. One was an Olympic champion, just legends in the world of college wrestling. And a group of them go in to get a workout. They see a gym there, and they see Froggy's Gym, and it was owned by Kevin Sullivan, the ex-wrestler Kevin Sullivan at the time. So these guys tell the story. They go in there, and they don't know anything about pro wrestling or pro wrestlers, but they're in there, and they're wearing, their college shirts. And Kevin Sullivan comes up to them and says, "Oh, I see you guys have college. What are you down here for?" And they're like, "Oh, we coach wrestling." And they talk a little bit. And Kevin Sullivan yells over to his wife or his girlfriend. He's like, "Hey, honey, come on over here. Come on over here. Come meet these guys. These guys are wrestlers too." And then he says, "Amateurs." Like they're amateur wrestlers. And of course, he meant it like they're not pro wrestlers. They're amateur wrestlers.
Collegiate wrestlers.
But I guess the way he said it was like, they're just amateurs, They're like not good enough to do the real stuff. And like these guys are like Olympic champions, national champions. They run the best college programs in the country. So I guess that joke kind of like passed through the college ranks, and a lot of the college wrestlers are like amateurs, and that just cracks the shit out of me up every time I think about it. We still joke about it at the gym, but when Bobby Lashley won the WWE title, what was that, a few months ago?
Yeah,
a picture of him with the belt on my phone, and I walked around our gym the next day, and I would grab fighters from the team. I'm like, "Hey, what do you think the best belt we ever won as a team was?" And everybody had a different answer. It was like, "Oh, when Mike Brown beat Uriah Faber for the WEC title because Faber was the #1 fighter in the world at that weight at the time." "Oh, well, the first UFC belt at this," or Amanda Nunes when she beat Cyborg to become a champ in 2 divisions. And everybody had a different answer, and every one of them I'd say, "Wrong." And I'd lift up the phone, and there was a picture of Bobby Lashley with his WWE champion. Like, fuck your UFC belts and your WEC belts. This is the real shit. And I was half kidding, but part of me was a little serious.
I'm not saying this just because you're here. I'm in a bunch of wrestling groups. I'm amongst many wrestling fans, and we all agree that it is about damn time Lashley got that belt.
Oh, I was so happy.
So overdue.
I was really happy for him. And it literally, I said it before, it meant the world to that guy. It like really completed his circle. He's happy as shit, worked hard. The guy got good. I mean, Bobby got good. Bobby's not bad on the mic. He's great in the ring. He's improved so much on what he does as a wrestler. It was just, especially to see how poorly he was used when he first went back to WWE, and then to see that it finally turned around when they put him in the Hurt Business Group, and MVP was really good on the mic, and just to see that thing go and see Shelton Benjamin get a little bit of a push, which was great. I'm a big fan of his, and just to see it all come together like that and him finally get the belt, I thought was pretty damn cool.
I absolutely loved it. Now it was a bittersweet moment for me. I loved when Tucker turned on Otis. Miz won the Money in the Bank contract. Miz cashes in, becomes champion. I love that moment. I love Miz on the mic. I love what he does.
He's great.
So when he goes in to face Lashley, as happy as I was that Lashley finally gets his title run, it did. The inner Miz fan in me was a little upset that Miz lost in like less than 2 minutes. But I was very happy that Bobby Lashley finally got it, and he's done amazing with it so far. He's the heel that they need. He's improved so much. That's actually a great segue into what I wanted to talk to you about, rewinding. Growing up a wrestling fan, and you got to enter into Impact and work with Bobby and work in the business that you loved so much. What was that feeling like, and actually being able to play a role in this world that you've been a fan of for so long?
Probably the coolest thing I ever did in my life. I will say one thing about The Miz, because I see what you're saying on that, but it's almost like that guy's Teflon. He is so good on the mic that he's like the only guy that having that happen to, and the way it went down, and avoiding the match with Bobby and then getting squashed. It's like the next
he can get squashed and it not hurt him.
His heat is just as good the next day. And he had his one run that lasted a little while with the title. I think he beat John Cena years ago, maybe.
And that's why it was such a win-win. It made him the first ever two-time Grand Slam champion. It made Bobby look dominant as all hell, how fast and the way he beat him. And like you said, it didn't hurt the Miz.
It really didn't. So, but getting back to the Impact thing, that was beyond cool. I sat there and just marked out the whole time I was there. I would go backstage and watch the guys cut promos, and I'd watch the guys go through their matches, and it was just, I was like a kid in a candy store the whole time. It was actually pretty funny the way it worked out. I just happened to be at a UFC show in Memphis, and Jeff Jarrett was there. It was in Nashville. I'm sorry, not Memphis. I want to say Memphis because I'm such a mark for Memphis wrestling. But it was
great wrestling.
Oh God, it was great. Lance Russell and Dave Brown calling the matches. I just loved it. But anyway, Jeff was there, and he just happened to be sitting right where I was sitting, and we struck up a conversation. We started talking about boxing. We started talking about wrestling. And we talked to this guy for like 3 hours. Just didn't even pay attention to the fights unless one of my guys. I had a few people fighting on that show. But we exchanged numbers, and he reached out and texted me like a month later or a couple months later. It was like, hey, would you be interested in doing an MMA deal with Bobby at Impact? And I'm like, fuck yeah. And he's like, okay, maybe I can come down and we can talk about it. And he came down and he's like, well, this is what we'd like to do. Just have something where you come in and we come up with some type of angle as to why you're here and what you're doing with Bobby. And we're not exactly sure where we're going to go with it, but you could bring some guys from your stable and we could run a program. I was like, dude, I am all in. He's like, we don't have the biggest budget in the world. What will we have to pay you guys? I'm like, shit, I was going to ask you the same question. What are you going to charge me? What are you, crazy? So we went there, and when we got there, it was just like, he's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, whatever you want me to do. And he's like, basically, shit, come up with a reason why you're here. What do you want to do? And I was like, okay, how about we're going to talk Bobby out of leaving wrestling. Wrestling sucks. We want him to come back to MMA. That's great. All right, what do you want me to say? Whatever you want. And they basically
just gave you the keys to the kingdom.
It was so cool. It was like so cool. And it was, I guess it would have been better had we been like in front of a real wrestling crowd rather than like in Orlando, where people were just like getting out of the heat and trying to find some AC, and they see a sign that says free wrestling show, get out of the sun. Most of the people didn't, a lot of people in the fans didn't know who anybody was or what any of the storylines were. But it was still so cool. And to see all the wrestlers and watch how they did what they did and get the backstage look at it and meet so many of them, just super, super cool. I had a blast.
Say people can say what they want about Impact or TNA as it's formerly known. But one thing they've always done were like these invasion type angles, the main event mafia, the aces and eights, and you with American Top Team. They were all so, I loved each and every one of them. I'm a huge aces and eights guy. I've got Garrett Bischoff's ring worn vest hanging up here in my studio. But to see what you guys were able to do, and I'm a believer that cross promotion helps everybody involved. I do have to ask you about Moose attacking your gym. How much of that, did he have free reign to just destroy everything, or how much of that was arranged?
Well, we knew what the plan was coming in. It's actually a funny story because when you come into our gym, we have a couple of trophy cases where we have, our higher level belts. There's regional promotions in MMA, and then there's the big boys.
I think that case that he smashed had like 2 Bellator titles in it. Yes, and
I didn't want to put the UFC belts in it because I didn't want to cause any grief with the UFC on it.
Yeah,
I happened to be filming an Impact, and Scott Coker from Bellator had called me, and I know Coker's a wrestling fan. And when he called me, he's like, "What's going on?" And for something, I forget what he called me for, and I was like, "Oh shit, I'm here doing this wrestling show." And he's like, "Oh, that's great." Like, hey, by the way, they want to do something where they come in our gym and like smash our trophy case or something. Can you don't care if I use your belts, dude? He's like, "Oh, hell no, go ahead." So I just threw the Bellator belt to UFC at the time to use theirs. They probably would have said too, Dana's cool as shit. He wouldn't have cared. But we keep our higher level belts in those cases. And
those Bellator belts are beautiful, aren't they?
Oh, they're super cool. And the newer,
so nice.
The newer version of them are even cooler because they got a lot more diamonds. They got more pop to them. But anyway, they said, we're gonna have Moose come to your gym. We got to do some type of run-in into your gym. And And I came up with the idea. I'm like, man, we got these trophy case. How cool would it be to have someone get smashed through it? And then we're thinking, that might be a little dangerous. So, man, I think we went online to like Craigslist or something and got like one cheap ass trophy case and just put it out there and put some belts in it. And that was the one he was going to smash. And we have they have the World MMA Awards every year, and it's in Vegas, and they make a big deal out of it. They got these trophies that are big, heavy trophies that look kind of like the Oscars, but with a guy kicking somebody. And for the last 4 years, we've gotten Gym of the Year. So we got a bunch of these trophies around, and we have some Fighter of the Year and shit like that, and those trophies hang around. So I'm like, man, how about Moose comes in and grabs that trophy and smashes the case with that? And that was the plan. And he comes in and goes through the whole thing, and everything's perfect. And he grabs that trophy and he smashes the trophy case, and it bounces right off. The trophy lands on the floor, breaks into like 500 pieces.
Jeez.
And the shelves inside the trophy case just kind of fall. And I was like, but the trophy case doesn't break. I'm like, oh, fuck. But we were able to go and put the shelves back up. And then we did another cut where he came in with a baseball bat and he smashed or some type of axe handle.
Yeah, it was like a club or something like that.
Yeah, something like that was laying around the gym. But it was almost a disaster. But it was actually pretty funny, I guess, looking back at it.
So still talking about because this kind of hurt me as a fan. Now I've always liked Impact. It kind of died off for a little bit as far as my taste. But I still watch it each and every week. James Storm is one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. Love watching him work. And when I saw yours and his match and his in-story career come to an end, I hated you, Dan. I hated you.
I'm a huge James Storm fan myself. I actually went to the taping, the pay-per-view in, I think it was Nashville, with Kenny Omega and Rick Swann. Mm-hmm. I went to that match. I happened to be at the UFC the night before, and Tony Khan was there as a friend of mine. And while we were talking, I was talking about the paper. He's like, oh, why don't you come up with me? So I was like, fuck yeah. So I left that pay-per-view and went with Tony. We went to Nashville the next day, and Kenny Omega was there, and we went and watched that match. And I hooked up with Storm because he was that guy for like 45 minutes. He is such a cool dude.
He just seems like a cool guy.
Dude, he is a super, super cool dude. I really like that guy. And it's actually kind of funny because when they were booking that match for his last match, he was gone. He was leaving. And some of those companies aren't, I guess, maybe the most respectful of certain wrestlers when it's their time to leave, and they don't give a shit what their legacy is or how they leave it. And they were like, okay, we're going to have you do this to Storm and this to Storm and this to Storm. I was like, fuck you. I'm not doing that to Storm. I'm going to piss my pants. I'm going to be scared as shit. And someone's going to have to hit him from behind, and I'm going to job him out that way. I'm not going to beat that guy or do anything to that guy. That's James Storm. Are you fucking kidding me? And it's just not doing it. I guess that's one of the benefits of not getting paid for it. I was like, I'm not in a million years am I going to do that. So
sitting back and watching James Storm, as big a fan as I am with him, and you being the fan of classic titles that you are, seeing him and Eli Drake as the NWA tag team titles or tag team champions, absolutely loved it. I've loved everything Storm done, all the way from Beer Money. The Beer Money and Motor City Machine Gun feuds were some of my all-time favorites. I loved watching Storm, and to see you come in, I hated you. I love you now. Thank you for doing the show, but I hated you in 2018.
And at least it was a total screw job. I got no offense in whatsoever, and I was scared.
So we're kind of getting to that 1 hour mark. I do want to be respectful of your time, but I do have to ask. We most recently saw you on the WWE Most Wanted Treasure episode, and I think that show is so cool. I love the idea behind it and watching these guys go out and get their artifacts. Talk to us about the show and how you were approached on them coming to your house, checking out the collection, and were you ever able to find that WCW title?
I've never heard of that title being anywhere. It's kind of weird because there's kind of like a weird backstory to that belt, because there were there were like a few iterations of that title. There was the Mid-Atlantic TV title, which I have, which then they kind of merged in together with the WCW TV title that I have. And then they kind of fell apart, and Ole Anderson went and started his own rival promotion, and I had that TV title. So I had like the grandfather and the uncle and the brother, but that one that was in between, I didn't have, and I've never even seen that belt or heard of anybody that said they had that belt. Every now and then you'll hear a belt that someone's got for sale. They say they want to sell you, and they're either asking for a crazy price or you just get a bad feeling about the guy. I've tried to verify belts that turned out to be fakes, even from old wrestlers themselves that are trying to pull one over on you. A couple of guys on my list that I want to kill that took a down payment, and then it turns out the belt was fake. But luckily, I got a guy that can authenticate any belt in the world because he made most of them, and he's a buddy of mine and a good guy. But, I've never heard that belt. I don't know where it is. I mean, if I had it, I would have given it to him. I'll probably end up giving all these to the WWE when I die. I mean, we get to a certain once you get past like my generation, it's like I think these older belts have less and less value because so few people grew up watching the territories and have any level of appreciation for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe an old Hulk Hogan belt's always going to be cool, or here the Steve Austin, Brian Pillman tag team title. That's
my God, the Hollywood Blondes.
Hollywood Blondes, titles like that might have like some good history to them. But I mean, how many people really care about Florida Championship Wrestling, and how many people really care about Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, other than maybe
there's less and less every day.
Except maybe like the Ric Flair first belt he held.
If there was ever a first, I mean, obviously the Bruno belt, but if there was ever a first belt to have, Ric Flair's got to be at the top of that list, if not far from it.
That's pretty cool. But when you mention the Bruno belt, I got to tell you a story. So they replaced the Buddy Rogers belt with this belt.
Yes.
And they call these Malka belts because I guess the guy that did the original eagle protruding out, his last name was Malka, so they call him the Malka belts. Anyway, the belt eventually finds its way into the hand of Pedro Morales. I guess Stasiak. Koloff. Let me even remember this. Let's see. Koloff beat Bruno. Did Pedro beat Bruno or did Pedro beat Stasiak? Fuck, I don't even remember. I got to put my thinking cap back. Pedro Morales ends up with the belt. He has his run. The story goes he was a big gambler, and the belt ended up in a pawn shop.
I've heard that.
When he left, and sat in the pawn shop for like somewhere between 25 and 30 years.
Jesus.
And the pawn shop was going out of business and being cleaned out, and the owner's grandson or somebody came across. I was like, what the hell is this? And the guy bought it from them, and I ended up getting it from that guy. But that's a little bit of a weird story, right?
That's one of those things where imagine how many people came into that pawn shop and walked right by it, not knowing exactly what they were looking at or the history that was there. Right. And then, hearing this story, if anybody who was in that pawn shop is watching, or anybody who later heard that story, you walk past a piece of priceless history that when sitting right in front of you, you had no idea what you're looking at. That's a fantastic story.
Crazy. Yeah, I think Koloff beat Bruno, Pedro beat Koloff, Stasiak beat Pedro, Bruno beat Stasiak, I think it's
way before my time, Dan.
Just popping into my mind trying to remember.
I have one final question for you. Somebody asked it earlier in the comments, and I saw this belt in Impact when you brought your duffel bag in. They want to know, do you still have the King's first World AWA heavyweight title?
I do. Hold on.
Kodai Radio Network, this is for you. We had some other questions come up, but he is about to show it right now. Oh, what a beauty. I remember watching this on Impact when he pulled all those belts out of the book bag, and what a trip down memory lane.
So Jerry Lawler beats Kurt Hennig.
Let's do this right here. We got to give that belt justice.
For the AWA belt. Then has that crazy feud with Kerry Von Erich, which is like my favorite thing Kerry ever did, where Kerry was heel in Memphis, Kerry was heel in Texas, which was kind of like the prelude for the Stone Cold Bret Hart thing, where one was a heel in Canada and Stone Cold was a face here, or vice versa. And then they combined the belts and they made the USWA. And
yes,
and they got rid of the AWA belt and they turned it into that one. So,
that is fantastic. Dan, I cannot thank you enough for being as generous as you have, getting up and getting all the belts and just a whole group of wrestling fans that are watching, making our night. I seriously can't thank you enough for doing this. I truly, truly appreciate it.
I don't know if it came through or not, but I love talking wrestling. So if you ever want to talk wrestling or you want to go belt by belt, count me in. I'll do it anytime.
Dan, I'm going to take you up on that because all the comments in here, I don't want to bug you. I don't want to annoy you, but I highly doubt this is the last time we're going to sit down and do this because I would love to know how you categorize your belts and all that other good stuff. But we definitely have to do this again.
Anytime. I love talking wrestling.
Dan, thank you so much. Have a good night, and I'll see you again very, very soon, my friend. Thank you.
Anytime. Take care.
Have a good night, Dan.
You too.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. This has been our episode with the man himself, Dan Lambert, and what an amazing, amazing collection and a very amazing person. Guys, I just want to take a chance to thank our amazing sponsors again for making this happen. Guys, Raise Energy, 0 calories, 0 sugar. No better way to start your day than with a can of Raise Energy. Go to repsports.com. Scrolling at the bottom of your screen, search Raise Energy. Use promo code HEALKEVIN to save 10% at checkout. Also, a huge shout out to A-Rock Designs, my wife's custom business, who makes all those cool wrestling cups you guys see floating around the hobby. If you want to get your hands on anything wrestling related, non-wrestling related, it does not matter. Place your orders at arockdesigns.com or A-Rock Designs on Facebook. Guys, with that being said, if you're watching on the Twitch channel, we will be live tomorrow at 7:45 for our SmackDown watch along. If you're watching on either of the YouTube channels, please feel free to go follow us. Switch to Twitch at twitch.tv/HeelKevin. We have belt giveaways, figure giveaways, merchandise giveaways. We do all kind of stuff. We streamed AEW live from Daly's Place last night. So feel free to switch to Twitch and join us at twitch.tv/HeelKevin. With that being said, guys, I will see everybody on Twitch tomorrow, 7:45 for SmackDown when myself and Madhouse Monstar go live. And for everybody else, we will catch you next week, this upcoming Thursday, for another episode of The War Room when we get back to our pro wrestling interviews. With that being said, thank you guys so much. Hit that thumbs up button, hit the like button, subscribe. And once again, guys, join us at twitch.tv/HeelKevin. Thank you all. We'll see you either tomorrow on Twitch or next week on YouTube. Thanks, guys. See you next time.